are the top 5 Yu-Gi-Oh decks post YCS Indianapolis.
Hey yo, how many videos has it been like this? You telling me I ain't had the pyramids on up? And y'all didn't say nothing? Shame on you.
Today, despite your ghastly oversight, I'm going to be teaching you what are the best 5 decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! And everything you need to know about them. My guy, even if you don't play these Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks, understanding what they do can be the determination between victory and defeat. Yugimoto, roughly around 2003 or whenever that game came out. Plus, on top of that, because of the new set Age Overlord, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is completely different than what you thought. There's some new sheriffs in town when it comes to the best decks. Of course, big dog, as always, I'll be putting personal deck lists on my Patreon as a special thank you for helping me pay my editors. But without further ado, let's jump on in and talk about those top Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks. So I think one of the biggest things to happen because of Age of Overlord was the demise of Unchained. Before the set, Unchained was taking over the top tables and was considered one of the best decks in the entire game. But now, because of some new cards and a couple of philosophy changes, Unchained is now more towards the backseat than ever before.
My guy, everybody's playing Abyss Dweller! Abyss Dweller's a killer!
But it trading spots as being one of the best decks to Yu-Gi-Oh! To just being a top contender is actually a nice fresh breath of air, especially when you consider that the racists are the best deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now.
Now listen here, boy. I don't like your kind around here. And as you already know, we here to stay like sister love.
Rescue Ace has become incredibly powerful due to the new Sinful Spoils engine. The original Sinful Spoils allows you to special summon a level 1 fire monster from your deck, and Rescue Ace Hydrant just so happens to be that card, making the deck ultra consistent.
But that's not exactly where the deck stops.
The original Sinful Spoils doesn't just summon Rescue Ace Hydrant inside of the deck, it can also special summon Jet Synchron, which you can use to synchro summon with Dia Bellstar to be able to make Borreload Savage Dragon, and you also can synchro with your Rescue Ace Turbulence to make it Baron de Fleur easy. This particular combo allows you to be able to protect Rescue Ace's original plan, which is to set Rescue Ace spell and trap cards to stop the opponent from doing things. One thing that I would advise anybody to look for when you're looking for a powerful deck, if it can utilize spells and trap cards, but also summon some of the most powerful generic monsters, it's probably really good. And for the old school players that know, basically what I'm saying is that this deck is Outlet Synchro. And I wish I could really stop there, but Rescue Ace gets even more toxic. Because of the new monster in Infernal Flame Banshee, Rescue Ace can actually search a monster named Nemesis Flag, and this card can summon Arch Nemesis Skatos. Arch Nemesis Skatos is a terribly powerful Yu-Gi-Oh! Card that completely stops players from special summoning a type of monster that you declare. It can be incredibly frustrating to play a Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck that's based on a particular monster type, and your opponent preventing you from being able to summon monsters to the side of the field just because they know what type of Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck you're playing. Rescue Ace is easily one of the top Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks in the game, but fortunately enough, it isn't the only best Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck in the game. I understand if you look at YCS Indianapolis, you see nothing but races everywhere, but as a purist, you might see a little bit of Purrely too. Purrely is really no stranger to being considered one of the better decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! All the way back to when Castura was considered one of the best, Purrely was smacking it left and right, all for the catnip. And one of the bigger reasons to play Purrely is because there are so many strategies like Rescue Ace that are focused on being able to stop monster-heavy decks. And Purrely does it a little bit different, because Purrely instead are ultra focused on spell cards and being able to use those spell cards to summon your monsters. You can actually play around a lot of things that Rescue Ace wants to do. And even when you look at some of Rescue Ace's most powerful and disruptive cards, Purrely actually has a couple of ways to be able to deal with that. One of the best things that Purrely has going for it that no other deck does is that Purrely Straight Street can actually protect your plays from a lot of the most powerful and popular cards. On top of that, Straight Street gives you more resources every single turn, and if your opponent actually is able to get over some of your Purrely monsters, you're gonna get some cards right back. Because it's a deck that runs so few monsters, a lot of players think that it's really dependent on Noir to be able to win the game, but in actuality, Purrely works completely different than what you may be thinking. It's actually a combination of things that make Purrely so powerful. The ability to be able to dodge some of the most important cards to Purrely straight street, being able to summon a huge X-Purrely Noir, which is incredibly hard to get rid of, but the biggest and most well-kept secret is that this deck will just out-advantage you. Purrely is a snowball Yu-Gi-Oh deck. The longer it survives, the more advantage that it gets, and soon enough, it just has way more resources than you ever could imagine, and it just wins outright because of that. And also because the deck isn't monster reliant in most of the other Yu-Gi-Oh strategies are, using cards like Summon Limit to slow your opponent down is really good, but doesn't stop you as a strategy. Now moving on, I'm not gonna lie, I was completely wrong about this particular Yu-Gi-Oh deck, and it takes a man to say that Mannadium is actually really good. It's a top 5 Yu-Gi-Oh deck. But I'm still gonna say you like to play with balls if you play with this deck. Mannadium got 2 new cards that could be considered as direct support, one of them being Visa Samsara, which doesn't seem really powerful on surface level, but being a monster that is Visa Starfrost on the field and graveyard allows you to summon some really powerful monsters that require Visa Starfrost in your extra deck. This deck just got another way to summon monsters like Scarecrow Lightheart to be able to get your combos started or continue them, but also another way to summon Vicious Astrolabe, which is an incredible Yu-Gi-Oh card, whether if you're using it to be able to synchro summon or you're using it to pound your opponent's monsters into the dirt. The other monster in Mannadium, Trusukta. My guy, balls in the deck, Trusukta. I'm not saying you sus, but the sus meter's definitely going off. Ironically though, some Trusukta is exactly what the deck needed because it allowed it to turn any Synchro 6 monster into a potential Synchro 8, which could be really important for Mannadium combos. I think where Mannadium fits at right now in Yu-Gi-Oh is the big combo deck that a lot of players fear. If you don't respect this deck, it will easily take your lunch. But if you respect this deck just a little bit too much, some of the other strategies that don't have overlapping weaknesses will take advantage. Now, the next 2 strategies I think are a little bit more debatable than the first 3. Hands down, Rescue Ace, Purrely, and Mannadium should probably be considered as the best decks moving forward. But those other 2 decks, it can be uncharted territory. Despite some of the bad things that I'll talk to you about in another video, there's some pretty good things going on in Yu-Gi-Oh right now, and one of them is deck diversity. The top 32 for YCS Indie was incredibly diverse, and I think you can take this home and run with it right now. If you just so happen to be pretty proficient out of a Yu-Gi-Oh deck, you more than likely can win. But if I had to give it to a Yu-Gi-Oh strategy right now, I would say despite a lot of cards being played against it, Tearlaments is still one of the best decks in the game. Now, a reason why I'm picking Tearlaments over Unchained, despite both of them having some of the same weaknesses, is because Tearlaments is a little more versatile. Tearlaments can not only summon some of the most powerful Xseed monsters in the game, like being able to make totally awesome to not only negate an opponent's important card, but steal it, and Beatrice the Eternal Lady to dump anything you want into the graveyard. It can also make some really cool Link monsters, which is important in the game, especially because SP Little Knight is a very big card. So essentially, if you look at it like that side by side, Tearlaments and Unchained have some similar things going for each other in the Xseed and Link department. But when you take it a step further, you realize that Tearlaments is still just a fusion deck. One thing that I did notice about the event is that a lot of players were using super polymerization to be able to get rid of Rescue Ace boards because all of the Rescue Ace monsters just so happen to have one thing in common: they're all fire. And in this particular situation, not only would you be able to get rid of powerful Rescue Ace monsters, you can also turn off their ability to use their Rescue Ace spell and trap cards. Tearlaments not only naturally plays those cards that you would typically use super polymerization to summon, it actually can summon those cards without super polymerization and gain its full effects. And because Tearlaments just has a little bit more extra deck space to use, as well as naturally playing those cards, it has natural ways to be able to counter decks that summon monsters that can be used for super polymerization. It's actually crazy how those decks mesh really well with Tearlaments, but that brings me to my 5th and final deck. Now, keep in mind, when I talked about these last two strategies, I did say it's a little bit up in the air because the format is really diverse right now. I do think because it did make a top 32 cut at YCS Indianapolis, it has a ton of potential. I personally think that Labrynth has everything in the making to be a top 5 Yu-Gi-Oh deck right now. Labrynth actually has some similar things going on to Purrely, because there's so many decks that are reliant on being able to stop monsters. They're not as focused on being able to stop your trap cards, and that's where the deck can really thrive. SP Little Knight is hands down one of the best cards that everyone is playing right now. Labrynth can actually search an answer to that particular card in most boards through Daruma the Destructive Cannon. And since Labrynth doesn't necessarily need its extra deck, it can play cards like Super Polymerization to not only break Rescue Ace, but also do a little bit more flexibility to be able to break a lot more boards. I genuinely think that right now Labrynth does have a perfect trap card to counter almost any situation in the game, and if all that ever fails, well, Eradicator Epidemic Virus them. Boy, you thought we fight fair? We don't fight fair! And that's all that I have for the top 5 decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! That you need to know about. Of course, if you want to see more amazing content, then go ahead and check out these videos. I hope you're having an amazing day, and if you aren't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day.